In the last video, we have seen how to define functions and how to call the defined functions in Python. So we have seen functions without parameters and with parameters. In this video, we'll see what fruitful functions are. So any function that returns a value to the calling function is known as a fruitful function. So we'll see in this video how fruitful functions can be defined and how they can be called. So we'll try to understand what is the advantage of these fruitful functions over the regular functions. If you observe the functions that we have defined so far, so they receive certain parameters and they do their job and they return to the calling function. But these functions do not return any value to the code block that is calling these functions. In this video, we'll see how a function can return a value back to the code that is calling these functions. Now let's define a function which returns a certain value. So let's consider this function definition. So the function name is square and it is receiving a parameter. In the function body, the function is computing the square of the received parameter, and moreover, unlike the previous functions that we have defined so far, so this function is having a special statement. Which is having the return statement. So using this return keyword, you can return a specific value from this function to the code that is calling this function. So a function which is designed to return a specific value to the calling code, so such functions are known as a fruitful functions. So now let's see how these functions can be called. So here if you observe, this is a statement that can be used to call this function square. So here this function is receiving a parameter, so you are passing a single argument, and as this function is returning a value, so there should be a left hand side part of this function call. So the returned value by this function will be copied to this variable after execution of this function. How this function executes is, so when this function is called, the value is copied to this variable, that is a. When the square function is called, the value that is passed as an argument will be copied to this parameter, and then the body of the function is executed. So that is how s will be getting the value of a into a, that is 25. And after completion of this, so there is a return statement. So this return statement is executed. So the return statement, you are returning the s value, that is 25, and that value will be copied back to this variable, and whatever the variable that is provided on the left hand side of this function call, to that variable the value will be copied. And here using this statement, you are displaying the value you are getting from the function. So that is how you can design the functions to return certain values, and such functions are known as the fruitful functions. Now let's execute this function and see. So you can see the value that is returned by the function is displayed here. So that is how you can design functions with return values. When a function is returning a value, either you can call that function by assigning the return value to a variable, otherwise directly we can call such functions as part of the print method also. So here if you observe, so square method is called as part of the print statement, where the function is called and computes the square of 7, and it is returning the square of 7, and that value can be directly passed to the print method, so that value will be displayed onto the output device. So unlike other programming languages like C, C++, Java, which allows to return a single value, Python allows to return multiple values also from a function. Now let's define a function which returns more than one value. Now let's consider this function definition. So the function name is calculator, and it receives two different parameters a and b, and here inside the function body we are computing the sum, difference and product of these two numbers a and b. So now let's try to return all these values that you are computing. So we can use a return statement to return one or more values in Python. So to return a single value, we have used the return statement, right? Similar to returning a single value, we can also return multiple values from a function by providing all the list of values separated by comma along with the return statement. This is how you can return multiple values from the function. So now let's see how this function can be called. So consider the statement where the function calculator is called. As the function receives two different parameters, so these two arguments 10 and 20 are passed to the function calculator. As the function is returning three different values, there are three different variables to receive those three return values as the left hand side of this function call. So you can see S, D, P are the variables that can receive the values sum, diff and the product values that are returned by the function calculator. After receiving these values can be used in the code. So like you can print the sum of the two variables that is computed by the calculator function, similarly the difference. So similarly the product of those two numbers is available in the variable p, and all the values are displayed using the print state. So that is how you can call the function which is returning multiple values from the function. So far in this lecture we have seen what fruitful functions are and how the values can be returned from a function. So how to return a single value, how to return multiple values, and when the fruitful functions are called, so how to store the returned values from the functions. So now I hope you understand how a function can be useful when it returns a value. Thank you for watching this video.